It's like the picture of Mary looking to Jesus and listening to his word, right? That picture, beholding. Take time to behold him. Speak off with thy Lord. And by looking to Jesus, taking time with him, listening, he, by the Spirit, is bringing forth thy friends and thy conduct, his likeness shall see, his life. I want to read a little story here that I think um, speaks to this. It's called the Refiner of Silver story. I don't know if you've heard this. It's not super long, but I want to read it. There's a certain tension between suffering and comfort. The Bible often associates suffering with fire that either destroys everything in its path or fire that purifies and refines. One we should avoid at all costs, the other produces something good, though through a painful process that might cause us to question our identity, our future, our source of strength and hope, perhaps even our very life. Let me tell you the story of the refiner's fire that speaks to this good kind of suffering. A young man happened upon a silversmith who refined silver and gold from raw materials sitting in front of his fire. "Why do you heat the metal?" he asked. The refiner answered, "In order to make precious silver, I have to remove all the impurities that make it worth less than it really is." The young man thought about his own life and how one time of fiery suffering or another was required to remove some junk from his own life. "Why do you sit while you work?" inquired the visitor. The refiner replied, "I have to watch the fire closely. Too much heat and the impurities will not be removed. Too much heat and the precious metal will be destroyed and made worthless." The young man reflected how his own life of comfort had brought a sense of complacency that led him to abandon his dreams, settling instead for a humdrum life. But he had also come through painful, fiery times with character and strength that he would not have found elsewhere. Then the young man asked the refiner, "How do you know when the silver is at the right temperature?" The refiner smiled and answered, "I know the purifying is complete when I can see my reflection in the silver." The young man marveled at answer, that answer, thinking, "That is true of my life. My own fiery trials were only complete when my refiner's image could be seen in me." The young man left contemplating the aspects of his life still needing to be transformed by the refiner. His own selfish desires, ambitions, and time-wasting activities, his tendency to quickly judge others or believe a lie that he never really examined. And he gave thanks to God, who's the only one able to free him from these impurities and transform him into the likeness of Jesus. Malachi 3:1-3 says, "I will send my messenger who will prepare the way before me. But who can endure the day of his coming? Who can stand when he appears? For he will be like a refiner's fire. He will sit as a refiner and purifier of silver." I thought that was a beautiful picture. And you can see that suffering is a part of the maturing process. Why? Because God is removing the things of the old man that I'm holding on to. And the fire, what does it say? "The flame shall not hurt thee. My only design is thy dross to consume and thy gold to refine." I want to read a quote here by C.S. Lewis. "There must be a real giving up of self. You must throw it away, blindly, so to speak. Christ will indeed give you a real personality, but you must not go to him for the sake of that. As long as your own personality is what you're bothering about, you're not going to him at all. The very first step is to try to forget about self altogether. Your real new self, which is Christ and also yours, and yours just because it is His, will not come as long as you're looking for it. It will come when you're looking for Him. Does that sound strange? The same principle holds, for more everyday matters, even in social life. You'll never make a good impression on other people until you stop thinking about what sort of impression you're making. Even in literature and art, no man who bothered about originality ever would be original. Whereas if you simply try to tell the truth without caring twopence how often it's been told before, you will 9 times out of 10 become original without having noticed it. The principle runs through all of life from top to bottom. Give up yourself and you'll find your real self. Lose your life and you'll save it. Submit to death, death to your ambitions, favorite wishes, every day, and death of your whole body in the end. Submit with every fiber of your being, and you will find eternal life. Keep back nothing. Nothing that you have not given away will ever be really yours. Nothing in you that has not died will ever be raised from the dead. Look for yourself, and you'll find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ, and you'll find Him. And with Him, everything else thrown in. I don't know how he said that in such a short amount of time, but I could repeat here. Our glory is when He's glorified through us, when He's recognizing us. That's what we were made for. That's the goal of the Lord in our lives. Our glory is not seeking our glory. Right? It's interesting how when we seek our glory, it's not glory. But when we seek for Him being recognized, that is who the bride is. That is who the Son of God is, the Son of Man. So there's no such thing as microwave maturity. You cannot get it overnight. And you can be encouraged by that. Some of you might be discouraged by that. But God is doing no less than bringing forth His goal in us. Okay? He's not doing a second-rate job. He only desires His intended, destined purpose for why He made us. And so often our disappointments in life is we had something else that we were aiming at. We're aiming at this, right? He's like, no, I'm calling you up. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that ye may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. Patience and time, abiding in the Lord, brings forth maturity. It was fitting for Him, for whom are all things and by whom are all things, and bringing many sons to glory, to make the captain of their salvation perfect through suffering. We see it there, that even the Son of God, the Son of Man, He was made complete in the purpose of God through the suffering of Him, going through that and learning to be obedient, learning to listen, and to trust His Father. To not seek His own recognition, but only that of His Father's. So fathers, speaking of fathers have children, okay? And there's a multiplying. And we see, let's look at this, John 12:23 through 26. You want to read that one, Esther? through 26, yeah.
And Jesus answered them, saying, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. Truly, truly, I say unto you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. He who loves his life will lose it. His life loses it. And he who hates his life in this world will keep it to eternal life, to life eternal. If anyone loves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there my servant will be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him.
Thank you. The hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified, recognized. And what is it? That he would lay down his life. And that through his laid down life, the cross and the selflessness, there would be a multiplying. Because the maturity is agape. That's the maturity. It says, we know in part and prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect comes, that which is in part will be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know just as I also am known. And now abide faith, hope, and love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. That's the Father. The Father, the maturity of the Father, Christ, he lays down his life for them, for the children. And that we grow up from children to young men to being as fathers who are mature with the love of the Heavenly Father. I love this quote that I'm going to read here by George MacDonald. It's a mouthful, but it's so good. God is no tame God. Though he loves us with the tender father heart of a child, he will not be mocked. Tears and entreaties will not work on him to the breach of one of his laws. Out of the prison of his own darkness, the childlike, imperturbable God will not let one of us come, will let no one come until he has paid the uttermost farthing. Neither is God a one-dimensional God. His love has more facets to its personality than our limited minds can fathom. Life is no series of chances with a few providences sprinkled between to keep up a justly failing belief, but is rather one providence of God. God is one, and that oneness is love, the foundational element of his being. But because we cannot grasp the inexhaustible reaches of that love, its constituent parts do not look to us as one. To our minds, the childlikeness and the consuming fire appear as division to his love. But God, I repeat, is one, the only perfect oneness in the universe. Nothing is inexorable but love. Love is one, and love is changeless. For love loves into purity. Love has ever in view the absolute loveliness of that which it beholds. Where loveliness is incomplete and love cannot love its full of loving, it spends itself to make more lovely, that it may love more. It strives for perfection, even that itself may be perfected, not in itself, but in the object. There is nothing eternal but that which loves and can be loved, and love is ever climbing toward the consummation when such shall be the universe, imperishable, divine. Therefore, all that is not beautiful in the beloved, all that comes between and is not of love's kind, must be destroyed, and our God is a consuming fire. I don't know how McDonald said that all in one paragraph. I mean, he said it all. The law is love. It doesn't change. He's doing it in us. Bang. Wow. He's writing it on our hearts. Oh my goodness. Love loves into purity. It's almost like that's where some of us we'd rather settle for religion because it's safer. You're like, don't give me that. I don't want to go that far, you know? Like um but no, to go on with God is to go on with him on his terms. And he must make us beloved to be able to express his love and his life through us. Okay? I don't know if you've heard this old song. No, I think we have it in the hymnal. It's so good. This one, oh, the bitter pain of sorrow that a time could ever be when I proudly said to Jesus, all of self and none of thee. All of self and none of thee. All of self and none of thee. When I proudly said to Jesus, all of self and none of thee. Isn't this a great song? Yet he found me. I beheld him, bleeding on the cursed tree, and my wistful heart said faintly, some of self and some of thee. Some of self and some of thee. Some of self and some of thee. And my wistful heart said faintly, some of self and some of thee. Day by day, you hear time happening. Day by day, his tender mercy, healing, helping, full and free, brought me lower while I whispered, less of self and more of thee. Less of self and more of thee. Less of self and more of thee. Brought me lower while I whispered, less of self and more of thee. Higher than the highest heaven, deeper than the deepest sea. Lord, thy love at last has conquered none of self and all of thee. None of self and all of thee. None of self and all of thee. Lord, thy love at last has conquered none of self and all of thee. Lord, let it be so in us. That you would have your purposes fulfilled in our hearts. Thank you that your goal for us is way higher than ours, and that we would let go of our small ideas and allow you to recognize Christ in us. Only you can do it by your Spirit, Lord. But as you've given us this vision, would you do it? You're the only one worthy to do it, Lord. Thank you. Did you want to say anything on that, love?
This line is coming to mind, so I'll say it. It was from the Corey reading earlier today. But God doesn't take away; He only gives. And I feel like that's all what you were saying. That from our human perspective, we're like, "Oh, He's taking away, He's wrecking, He's ruining, He's and He's not. He's giving. He's giving us more of Himself, and what He's taking away is the rocks and things that are displacing more of Him in my life, and His love is making us lovely.
It's so good. I'll just open it up here. Does anyone have anything that you would want to share? Any comments or anything the Lord highlighted or something in what we've covered here? Yes.
Yeah, I was thinking how this goes along with the Sark's teaching, and how being filled with the Spirit of God and being perfected in God. And that's how God wants us to be as God. You know, the flesh says, I want to be God, but we can't be God without God.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not by power, it's not by might, it's by the Lord's Spirit. And it's Jesus doing that in us. And it's him being glorified in us and him being recognized and us being recognized in him. And I think God wants us to get to the point, well, I know, where it's not about the glory, it's not about us being recognized, it's where we want to reflect the master's face, and that's true glory. So
Mm-hmm.
thoughts.
That's so good. So true. Really beautiful. It's really beautiful, I think, to think of. It's like, ooh, it almost gives you like a vision statement for where God is going. Um, so it's a process of me continuing on in the way with Him, receiving His word, allowing Him to have access to me, and to, when to bring Him, like, Lord, this is me. Would you do this in me? Would you live in me? And allow Him um, to know me in my weakness, and that I can know Him in His power living through me. Okay. Anyone else on any of these things? Yes.
This is one of the really interesting things that I hadn't thought of that jumped out at me as I've been working on my paper about blood covenant. It's just that all blood covenants take a process. It's not just under most circumstances. It's not just oh, we should do a blood covenant, boom, and then it's done. Like most obvious example is Abraham, where God calls him and makes a promise to him and starts that covenant. And then throughout Abraham's life, God then takes the next step forward, and then later takes the next step forward. And just the Abrahamic covenant, it takes quite a long time before, like, the promises were there the whole time, but he keeps on taking the next level deeper, next step forward. And then that happens again with Jacob, where he promises it to him, and then we see further down in Jacob's life, I'm taking that next step forward. And just then again with Israel, you see that process, and you brought up with Jesus how it was a process in his life as well. Just that was one of the things that I hadn't really thought of in that way before, but covenants take a process. It's not just one thing.
Mm-hmm. That's really good. From glory to glory. Yeah. That's cool. That's good, John. Do you want to say anything, Dr. D or Mrs. D?
She's been talking back here the whole time.
You're getting the commentary back there. Yeah, it's Rachel.
So piggybacking off of what John was saying, something that's been standing out to me as we brought it up in the teaching was that Jesus learned to listen through the things that he suffered. And Mrs. Steve will quote this so often, but like he every day offered up prayers with loud groanings and tears, and like thinking on that and how he had to walk away first to receive the glory of his father, the recognition of his father in his life. Like he didn't just have it, he had to receive it. He had to know his father in the deep darkness. Like he had to come near to his father and surrender what he thought, and receive what his father said, like in daily living. Because in everything he went before us. And he calls us to do that. So he had to do that. Like he had to walk like that. And just thinking like like in my own life, the things that I cling to and think is like my own understanding of like, oh, I thought it was like this, or I want it to be like that, or it's very real deep things that are, I think they're seated in when we're the Lord's, they're seated in like, there's a rightness in it, but they won't be right fully. They won't have the recognition of God there unless there's that surrenderedness of like, okay, Lord, I don't actually know. So, you know, I don't know how to get to that place that I feel it like that is in there that you're calling me to, unless I just surrender it to you. And I don't know if that's making sense, but I was thinking about this recently and it was like, why would you ask that? Like, and he's like, no, come to me in the deep darkness. That's where I am. You know, when he like brings you through or up to something and there's that battle of like, I don't want to give that up. That's my whole dream, or that's my whole desire, or that's my whole like, that's what I thought about for the last forever. And you're saying it's wrong, but there's something there that's like, there's something so right there. Like, what is it? And it's something God put within us, but He has to fulfill it. And so, like, in surrendering it, you find that maybe it's not exactly the way you thought it would look, feel, or seem, or play out, but it's better. It's like when God comes into you in whatever it is, it's life. It's in kind. It's in the very thing that you wanted all along. It's just better than you ever thought. It's like you're saying it's backwards. I'm just trying to. I was just thinking on that when we were talking about that. But it is backwards, but then it's so right. Like it's actually turned upside right, and you were thinking backwards the whole time. So just that trusting the Lord and surrendering, going to Him in whatever it is He's putting His finger on, or digging around in. You find that His recognition in that is it's what you always wanted. It was that desire. Like I wanted that for me, but really in going to Him and surrendering it, it becomes what you really desired. Does that make sense? Like, just some thoughts.
Yeah, it's the thing we were made for, desired, made for, deeply desire, and are most afraid of at all at the same time. The relationship with God, it's like religion is way easier and formulas are way easier. Like, give me the formula. Then I don't actually have to have someone, that I have to interact with. But is that what you really want? You weren't made for that. That's good, Rachel. Thank you. You're gonna say something, sir?
Yeah, I was also thinking, in John 15, verse 8 says, "My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit, and so prove to be my disciples." And I was just thinking, have you ever seen the short clip by Eric Lee called "The Gospel"? And it's so cool. Like first, he has to take him out of the prison cell and take and clothe him. He's like, you're my son, and being justified in that and covering him. And then the sanctification, teaching him all that stuff, and then it's not like that's not where it stops. He goes out and he he bears fruit. Me and Mrs. D were talking about this earlier, but we're supposed to rule. God tells us to rule over the creatures in the earth, but we're always like, oh, we see how powerless we are, and so we don't believe that we're supposed to. And it's like, well, that's a partial truth. Like we can, but it's God. It's God bearing much fruit in us and through us. And I don't know, I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, that's how the design back in the day, I remember the morning meetings before we had girls, and Dr. D would be there going on and on about God being the tentacles. And I'm like, Dr. D, what are you talking about? And he's sitting there, yeah, like the tentacles from heaven, and all of a sudden he's like, oh, duh, it's John 15, But it was so fun anyway, because it was like, we're connected to God, John 15. That's right. That's how it was designed to work. Not that we have something apart from him. He is what we have.